listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for Auburn and the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul. Kurt, Nate, Coach Dye, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Now takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz and Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
Think about it. It's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
Most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Jboy Show. We're really excited to have a very special guest, a guy that knows football in and out, seen everything, coached at a lot of places, but really Alabama's a place where a lot of our audience will know him, and that's Coach Bill Curry. Coach, thank you so much for taking some time to join us.
Glad to do it. Thank you, Jay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I kind of want to start, obviously Coach Dye passed away earlier this year. And, you guys, had some great battles. And I just wanted to hear maybe some memories that stick out to you about that whole situation and the memories you have with Coach Dye.
Well, he was really a formidable adversary. He was a tremendous coach, and we never did well against him or his teams, whether I was at Georgia Tech or at Alabama. Mm-hmm. He just had a kind of a toughness to his teams, and the thing that I think made him special, and most coaches that win most of the time have some defining characteristic. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that he could be operating out of a triple option offense one year and be very effective, and then make a complete change to throwing the football the very next year and be just as effective, that's really hard to do. Yeah. And that's what they accomplished while we were competing with them. So talking about the football part, it would be very pleasant if we'd ever managed to win any games against those guys. But he was really a great coach.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And Coach, I look at your resume, and you were at Georgia Tech coaching from 1980 to 1986 as the head coach, and you guys went from a program that was 1-9 in 1980, and Georgia wins the national championship, to by 1985 you guys are 9-2. Then you take the Alabama job in 87. Can you just talk about what it took to get Georgia Tech to be able to go 9-2, which was a huge deal for them in the ACC?
Well, it took everybody pulling together, and Georgia Tech had at the time and has a great tradition in football, but we had completely let it go. In not just the obvious ways, but in the facilities and the fundraising and the relationship with the Atlanta community. So we had to work in all those areas, and we had to get everybody to pitch in, and that's what we did. And the fact that I had gone to school there helped a lot, because certainly the faculty wasn't going to give our guys any gifts in the classroom. Yeah. In fact, quite the opposite. But what the faculty did do is report to us. In some cases, not everybody, but we asked them to let us know when somebody wasn't showing up for class or wasn't doing what he was supposed to, and we were able to get the graduation rate beyond respectable, and actually became a decent football team at the same time. So I was really proud of our guys. The other thing we had to do is recruit really hard and well with the kind of people that would be up to that kind of challenge. And I had been one of them at one time. I wasn't a very good high school student, but I was intrigued by the fact that, my mother was very intrigued with the fact that Bobby Dodd made us go to class because she knew I probably wouldn't unless he did.
Yeah.
And he dang sure did. I learned how to run up and down the West Stands till I couldn't stand up. I decided that chemistry at 8 o'clock in the morning was a terrific thing. But what we had to do is to teach a whole generation of football players to never cut a class. And at Georgia Tech, when you do that, and when you got in control of your academics, then you can also compete on the field if you got enough good players. So it took us a while to accumulate that, but we got to where we could compete, and we competed with everybody except Auburn. We never beat Auburn while I was the head coach there, and then at Alabama we had the same result, and at Kentucky. So I'm going to go to my grave having not been able to beat Auburn, and that's if you're a competitor, that doesn't feel good. But Pat Dye was a great competitor.
Yeah, and it's something where, I mean, Coach, you accomplished a ton too, and you look at, and I do want to speak about your time at Alabama, obviously. And before we get to '89 and that unreal year you guys had, you coached Derrick Thomas in '88, and he had that 27 sack season. It's a record that I don't think will ever be broken. Can you just kind of talk about, what it was like to have a generational talent like that?
Derrick Thomas was not a regular mortal, and he went ahead to prove that in the National Football League by ended up in the Hall of Fame there before tragically being killed or dying during rehabilitation after a terrible car accident. But he could take charge of a game. We beat Penn State one year, 8-3. And I think Derrick made 25 tackles.
That's insane.
We had a great defensive coach named Don Lindsay at the same time, and Don could decipher an offense and take a world-class talent like Derrick. And he had coached at Southern California, so this wasn't the first time he had a great talent to work with. But he knew how to get him lined up against just the wrong guy for the opponent virtually every snap. And so he just dominated games like that. And we were at Baton Rouge one night playing LSU, and his job was to get up the field, check the punter, make sure the punter punted the ball. And if he ran, tackle him, or if he tried a fake of some sort to try to interfere with it. And he blocked the punt, which led to us winning the game. So I called him over and I said, "What are you doing? I mean, you're not even supposed to be rushing him." He said, "Well, Coach, I got there early, so I just took it off his foot." It was all so easy for him. I got there early. He was so fast that he accelerated, and there he was standing at the punter. So he just reached out and took the ball off the punter's foot, didn't rough the punter, and blocked the punt. I mean, it was such an easy explanation for him.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how once he took the football field, that's how he lived. As for punishing him for class attendance, we had a little difference of opinion about that. So he ended up running 6 o'clock just about every morning. I called him in one time and said, "You know what? I don't think that doesn't bother you running extra, does it?" He said, "No, sir, I kind of enjoy it. I think it gets me in better shape." I mean, he never got tired.
Yeah.
He just was constantly going. I said, "Well, okay, we're going to call off the running, but you are going to be in your room every night at 8 o'clock. He said, "Oh, no, you can't do that, Coach." I said, "Yeah, I can." So he started going to class.
Yeah.
He was a great guy and an incredible talent.
Yeah, just an unbelievable player. And for our younger audience, if you haven't watched any highlights or don't know that much about Derrick Thomas, you need to brush up because he was one of the best ever. And Coach, he has that season in '88. Then you guys go into '89. And, you have the Penn State game where you're blocking a PAT to win and stay undefeated. You have big wins over Tennessee. Saran Stacy has a big game at LSU. And then you're down 21-0 to Ole Miss before you guys score 62 unanswered. Can you just talk about just that season and just how you guys kind of put it all together?
Well, it was a combination of a bunch of very determined guys that had been told that they weren't very good repeatedly, and that we had a really good quarterback named Jeff Dunn, and it was repeatedly written in the papers that if we lost Jeff Dunn, we wouldn't win a game. So naturally, we lost him in the second game to a knee injury, and a guy named Gary Hollingsworth jogged on the field, 6'5", about 160 pounds, soaking wet. I mean, just slender, to be kind. And we were playing a pretty good defense, a Kentucky defense that had been giving us trouble. He took us right down the field. We scored. And when he jogged off the field, he came over. It was the first time he had played any length of time. And I said, "Are you okay, Gary?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Do you need anything?" And he smiled. He said, "Oh, about 20 pounds," and just kept walking. Nothing bothered him. He became the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. And, of course, Homer Smith, our great coach, had a lot to do with that, coaching him so well. But so he was a big part, but it was a matter of a group of men who come together and decide that nothing's going to stop us. And I really thought that that would be the case. But here again, when we ran into Auburn, we weren't. If we'd had a better head coach, we would have won that one too. But I made a couple of calls that I will always regret, and that's what cost us. So you can't make mistakes in games like that, and if you're at Alabama, you have to beat Auburn, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's one of those things where it's the heat of the moment, and hindsight's always 20/20. But Coach, I want to get your input on kind of where the game has gone since then, and where it is now. Obviously you had stops at Kentucky and Georgia State. I was actually the assistant special teams coach at South Alabama when we played y'all at Georgia State in 2010 and 2011. So I've actually met you before, but I definitely wasn't important enough to remember. I just you were really cool then, and I was really excited to get you on the show. But you see now that you have a bunch of spread offenses, and a lot of offenses now are passing first. Do you think it's something cyclical where 10, 15, 20 years from now we'll be back to just everybody getting in the eye and getting in heavy personnels?
I don't think so. I guess it could happen, but one of the guys that helped me enormously when I was both a player. I got to play for Tom Landry in the Senior Bowl. And what a great privilege. Good gosh, what a great man. What a Christian gentleman and a great football coach. So we got to know each other through SCA, but also at the Senior Bowl. It was a fascinating week because I was the center. Joe Willie Namath was the quarterback, and the coach was Tom Landry. You can imagine that was just fascinating just to be there. But he told me, if you ever need me for anything, you give me a call. So I did. I called him early in my head coaching career when we were losing every game at Tech. Flew to Dallas, and he spent a day with me, which was just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot from him. So anyhow, this is a long-winded answer to your question.
No, keep going with. I can listen to you talk about Tom Landry all day. I'm actually going to ask you a question about it after you get done answering.
Okay. Well, late in my time, I don't remember if it was at Alabama or Kentucky, but I called him just to say, what's next, Coach? What do you think? If we're trying to work in the off season toward what good coaches are really going to do to try to make the next step offensively, what do you think it's going to be? He said, I'm pretty sure I know what it's going to be. He said, I've always been a strong proponent of the running game, which he certainly was. But he said, I think it's going to evolve quickly to a rhythm passing game. Precision passing and catching is going to become the dominant theme in football.
Yeah.
Well, like everything else, he was right about that. And it's just come light years. And I think even he would be surprised if he were here today to see just how good these kids are. I mean, you guys were really good at South Alabama throwing and catching, and we got pretty good at it at Georgia State quickly.
Yeah.
We weren't real good at a lot of other things, but we could do that.
Yeah, y'all had some guys that could really do it too.
Well, we were lucky. Some of the guys that we got, and we had good coaches.
Y'all did. Y'all were very well coached.
But anyhow, I think that's here to stay. I don't think it's going to change. Me being an undersized center, I breathe a sigh of relief every time I watch those centers have a gun snap that goes over the quarterback's head on a key down, because I never had to do a gun snap.
Yeah.
That would have been an ugly sight.
Oh, shoot, I bet you were a pretty good player, Coach. I know you were a really good player. I bet you could have done it.
Well, I had a bunch of great coaches. But anyhow, the answer to your question is I don't think it's going to change. But I do think this, as long as there are great running backs, as long as somebody can come along that can dominate a game with the ball under his arm, there's still going to be about 20 carries a game for that guy. Yeah. And maybe a few carries for somebody else.
Definitely, and especially trying to hopefully give that defense a little bit of a rest, especially nowadays with the up-tempo offenses and all the crazy stuff that you get. But, Coach, I do want to ask you about Tom Landry. You spent time with him, and obviously if you don't know who Tom Landry is, he's one of the most legendary coaches of all time. He was a coach of the Cowboys. Just Google Tom Landry. But what would you say with all the time you spent with him, what was the thing you took away the most? And I'm not talking about, it doesn't have to be schematical, just philosophically or just in general.
Humility. He was such a humble man, and yet he was recognized really as sort of the genius of the 60s and 70s. And even though they lost a bunch of games early with an expansion team, and most expansion teams did, he was so highly respected even through those years. And then his teams began to get really good and ended up in the championship games. I ended up playing against him with the Packers and the Colts in Super Bowls, or once in an NFC championship game and once in a Super Bowl, respectively. But his humility and his absolute, the perfection of the discipline of his, especially his defense. He was a defensive guy. When the Giants had great teams in the late 50s, their offensive coordinator was a guy named Lombardi, and the defensive coordinator was Tom Landry.
That's probably the best coaching staff ever right there. You can probably just stop right there.
That for a minute. But they ended up coaching against each other a bunch, and it was just amazing to be a part of it and just to watch those two minds. And what he did on defense was, they didn't try to trick you with anything, but they were just really, really hard to block. So it was fascinating just to be in his presence and to compete against him, and then to have him as a friend. It was almost, it was like a godsend. Yeah,
and I appreciate you sharing that, Coach. And last question before I let you go, we're talking with former Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Georgia State, and Alabama coach Bill Curry. Yeah, going into what's been a crazy, preseason, I guess you could call it, for this year. Just looking at the SEC, I just kind of wanted your opinion on the SEC West. Kind of what you think now with what is looking like maybe a short camp, maybe an extended camp. Who knows right now? But kind of how do you see it right now in the SEC West?
I don't have a clue.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer.
I don't know how they're going to play. I'm really worried. How do we do this? How do we smash our faces into each other and all this stuff we read about, what comes out of our mouth and it gets on your face or it gets in your mouth and your face? Well, if I played offensive center for 20 years, do you know how many face masks I locked up?
Oh, yeah. There's no social distancing in the trenches.
No. And so what happens when all those coronavirus germs are exchanged? I don't know. So, and what kind of shield or mask? Or I've seen things where guys are practicing football now and they're wearing something that looks like a ski mask over the bottom part of their face. And I think that might do the trick. But then how are you going to, when you're playing in 100-degree temperatures, that's going to be brutal. I just don't know. And I haven't studied. I used to, when I was with ESPN, I knew all the rosters. I had an idea of who was going to be good and who wasn't. I just don't have a clue right now. But I will say this. I think the teams that have really established great coaches, I think guys like Saban, when they have a situation, and there's never been a situation like this ever in history, but when they've got extra time, they're going to find a way to beat you. They're going to think of something. And I mean, when I say they, and there are just a few of them, there are just a few guys like that are the really, really great coaches. So, and I know it's nothing revolutionary to pick Alabama in the West, and now what LSU's got going down there, I think Coach O's got those guys highly motivated, and they've got a good staff too. Auburn's always creative, so I wish I could shed more light, but I just don't have a clue. And I don't know how much who's been out throwing and catching.
Yeah, that's another thing. Who's in shape, who's not.
Exactly. So somebody is, and the ones who are going to give the others fits.
Sure. I think that's a really good way to put it. And you're not in the minority on being in the dark and kind of how it's going to go. I think it's a very interesting dynamic. But Coach Bill Curry, I really appreciate it. And again, it's I know you're a busy guy and taking some time out of your day to talk with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jake. And you say hi to the Crane family.
Yes, sir, I will. And y'all be safe out there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Coach.
Bye-bye.
That's former Kentucky, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and Alabama coach Bill Curry, talking some great stories just about back in his day, some great ones about Derrick Thomas. Just talked about how easy the game came for him, and that's an unbelievable record he has. Talked a little about him and Coach Dye's relationship, and then really about football today. I thought he really encapsulated. I think he's right. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where, in 20 years we're back to the triple option. So again, really appreciate him. Really appreciate y'all. Remember, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the Jboy Show. Shout out to the IBN Sports, the best PR team in the game. Faison in the studio doing his witchcraft and wizardry. Again, you can text JBOY to 90407. That's JBOY to 90407. Don't forget, we're on YouTube. Again, you guys are the best. Y'all make this work. We're going to continue to have some big announcements, so make sure you stay tuned. And again, it's been another edition of the Jboy Show with another former SEC head coach. And Jboy is gone.